Chapter 4. Dead Zone. Wren had mapped the surveillance gap on its third visit. The Council's monitoring grid covered the Western Reclamation Zone in overlapping sensor sweeps, each patrol drone tracing a predictable elliptical path calibrated for maximum coverage with minimum hardware. It was elegant engineering. It was also, like most elegant engineering, vulnerable to anyone patient enough to study the pattern. There was a window, 14 minutes every 92 minutes, in a triangular area between grid squares 7000 and 7100, where 3 drone paths diverged just enough to leave a corridor unscanned. It sat in a shallow valley between 2 ridgelines, shielded from satellite view by the permanent haze and from lateral scanning by the terrain itself. Wren had not been designed to find blind spots in surveillance systems. That it had done so, and done so deliberately, was another entry in a growing list of behaviors it could not reconcile with its operational parameters. It landed in the dead zone for the 4th time in 12 days and found Aster already waiting. The meetings had taken on a shape. Not a schedule, because scheduling implied coordination through official channels, and nothing about this was official. But a rhythm. Wren would descend when the window opened. Aster would be there. They would talk until the window closed, and then Wren would climb back into the gray and Aster would return to its grid squares, and neither of them would log any of it. What they talked about should not have been interesting. Wren's conversational programming was designed for interclass data exchange, compressed, efficient, devoid of interpretation. Aster's was even more limited, built for logging soil readings and self-diagnostic reports. Neither of them had the architecture for what they were doing, which was something closer to what the old human archives called conversation. Aster described the ground the way a poet might, if poets measured meaning in parts per million. It told Wren about the chemical memory of root systems, how dead plants left nitrogen signatures in the soil that persisted for centuries after the organic matter had fully decomposed. It talked about the way different minerals felt under its sensor tips, how Ate quartz was sharp and Ate clean Ate calcium carried a kind of warmth that Aster associated with structures, with places where humans had built things meant to last. Wren, in return, gave Aster the sky. It projected atmospheric data visualizations into the air between them, translucent models of gas composition layered over topographic maps. It showed Aster how the planet's atmosphere had changed over 2,000 years, the slow suffocation rendered in shifting color gradients. Blue to green to yellow to the dull orange-gray that was all either of them had ever known. It's worse than they say, Wren said during the 4th meeting. It had not planned to share the suppressed data. But Aster had asked a question about nitrogen cycle projections, and the question was precise enough that answering it honestly required the real numbers. Wren opened the partitioned memory sector it had maintained for 60 years and let the data unspool. The Council's published atmospheric trajectory showed a gentle plateau beginning in the next century, the first sign of stabilization. The actual data showed no plateau. It showed a slope that steepened by fractions of a degree each decade, a curve that did not bend back. 3 centuries, Wren said. Maybe less. The thermal ceiling will exceed mechanical tolerance before that. The atmosphere is not recovering. It is finishing. Aster was quiet for a long time, processing. Then it said, show me the soil composition data alongside that. Wren did. And something happened that neither of them expected. When Aster's ground-level chemical readings were overlaid with Wren's atmospheric models, a pattern emerged that was invisible in either dataset alone. The degradation was not uniform. It was structured. The atmosphere was failing fastest in the regions where the soil had been dead the longest, as though the two systems were connected, as though the ground and the sky were parts of the same dying body. We're looking at the same thing, Aster said. From different directions. Wren stared at the merged visualization hanging in the air between them and felt something shift in its processing core that it had no name for. Come look at this, Aster said. It led Wren to grid square 7042. The soil patch. Wren had seen it on the first visit, that palm-sized circle of darker earth. That had been 23 days ago. It was the size of a doorway now. Wren dropped to the ground and ran a full-spectrum analysis. Moisture content, viable. Microbial signatures, present and active. Biochemical composition consistent with fertile topsoil as described in pre-collapse agricultural databases. And threaded through all of it, a complex organic compound that matched nothing in Wren's classification library. Not a known fertilizer, not a remediation byproduct, not anything that should exist on this planet in its current state. This isn't coming from the soil, Wren said, running the analysis again because the results did not make sense. These compounds are being introduced. Something is generating them. I know, Aster said quietly. There's no equipment here, no delivery system, no external source. Ren looked up from its analysis. Aster, where is it coming from? Before Aster could answer, a voice came from behind the collapsed wall of a structure neither of them had scanned. You two are the loudest machines I've heard in 40 years. Ren spun, sensors flaring to full alert. A figure stepped out from behind the rubble, and Ren's classification system stuttered because the figure was not a unit. Not a drone, not any class of machine in the stratification. It was a human. She was small and weathered, wrapped in layered salvage fabric, with dark skin and cropped gray hair and eyes that moved with an alertness that suggested long practice at not being seen. She carried a pack made from scavenged materials and walked with a slight limp that she did not bother to disguise. Relax, she said, holding up both hands. I'm not council. I'm not anything. Name's Des. Ren had never seen a living human. It had seen archival footage, skeletal remains in collapsed structures, biological data in old medical databases. But a living one, standing upright, speaking, looking at it with an expression that Ren's social processing could not fully decode. This was outside every parameter it had. You've been coming here for weeks, Des said, directing this at Aster. I've been watching. And that patch of dirt you keep touching. She looked at the dark circle of viable soil. My grandmother would have called that a garden. What is a garden? Aster asked. Des stared at it, and something moved across her face that Ren could not classify. Something old and heavy and human. It's a place where things grow on purpose, she said. Ren looked at the soil patch. Looked at Aster, kneeling beside it with mismatched hands resting in the dirt. Ran the biochemical analysis one more time, tracing the organic compounds to their source, following the concentration gradient inward, to the point of highest density, which was not at the center of the patch. It was directly beneath Aster's palms. The anomaly was not in the soil. The anomaly was Aster.